Well, welcome everybody. We got everybody, well, a couple people still popping in. I'm excited to do this class today. This is one I always enjoy. It's kind of fun to talk about all this kind of stuff. Thanks for coming on camera for those of you who are. Absolutely. If you have your camera off and are able to turn it on, I would really appreciate it. I'll just say, as the one teaching the class, it's just so nice to see smiling faces instead of just little squares with your name. People are hopping in, so as people come in, I'm just going to kind of get things started because, first of all, I have never finished this class on time. We teach this class every few months, and every single time I go over, and most of the time it's because there's so many questions that agents have. And so, first of all, ask away, right? If there's a question you have, just go right ahead and ask it. I really want to hear and I want to stop for those questions. If we have to go over, which I expect might happen, feel free to hop off if you need to. I am recording today, and the recording will be posted in the coaching community, so you'll be able to come back and watch the end of it later if you're unable to stay for the whole time. I just suspect we're probably going to go over it just because it usually happens. Uh, Kind of what we're talking about today is what we do with a buyer from the time you meet them all the way till closing. I'm going to go through that entire process and really focusing on what you need to do as a real estate agent during that time. So even if you bought a house before, you weren't the agent, perhaps, and so you might not be aware of everything that happened. Um, Sound good? Any questions before we get going? All right. Has anybody in here had a buyer client already? Got one. Taylor. Oh, okay, good. So most of the people in here probably have never had a buyer client, which is fine. Like that's what this is for, is if that has not happened to you, I want you to feel really confident about everything that's going to happen during this process. It's going to make you feel more confident with your client and it's going to help you not miss things. So that's kind of what we're going. I also wanted to say before we get started, I've had a cold for a few days. So if at some point I'm on mute, it's because I had to cough. So I'm just going to just give me a second and I'll get right back to it. And hopefully my voice will last out this whole time. All right, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to be sharing a checklist for you. I'm going to put the link to this checklist in the chat. You can also find this checklist in the coaching community. So either of these places, you're going to be able to get this checklist. And it's going to be handy, right? I put this checklist together. It's nothing official. Um, this is just kind of a checklist of what I personally do with my own buyer clients. So, if you find an agent who does something different than I do, it's not a right or wrong thing. This is just what I do, right? So do that with what you will. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So I wanted to start off with what happens at the very beginning when we have a buyer client. And so this could mean maybe you did an open house and you met someone at the open house and they're a potential buyer. Or perhaps you have a friend at work who referred you to this potential buyer client. Okay, so somehow a buyer came into your world. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is put that person in command. All right, somebody come off of mute. Why am I doing that very first thing?
So you don't forget.
Exactly. So I don't forget them. Because me, I'm going to forget them, right? Anybody else like that would forget them a couple months later? I see a couple nods. Yep, absolutely. Because imagine this, if you meet somebody at an open house and they're not ready to buy for 6 months or a year, by that time I might drop them, right? So putting them in command helps me remember to follow up with them. If you're doing open houses, you need to follow up with those people forever. Sometimes it's more than a year before they're ready to buy. If you don't follow up, you're going to lose them. Okay, so I'm going to put the person in command. I want to try to get their name, phone number, their email, add some notes, and I'm going to put them on a follow-up smart plan. So if that person thinks they want to buy a house in the next 4 or so months, I'll probably be in touch with them weekly. If it's somewhere between 4 to 9 months, it might be a monthly phone call. And even beyond that, it might be quarterly. But this is just a vague thing. It doesn't have to be exactly this. It's just approximate. Who in here has a buyer client, and do you have very similar follow-up, or what do you do differently?
Well, I have a buyer that wasn't pre-approved, so now my plan with him, just because this is his first time purchasing a home, he's older. I'm actually following up with him weekly, just because he's so sensitive. But if it was another buyer, I will follow with them probably maybe twice a month. But it just
There
depends
you
on the
go.
cadence of the person.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm glad you said that. It depends on the person, right? There's no cookie cutter for how often we should follow up. Okay, great. So I'm going to figure out how often I want to follow up with them. I'm going to create a smart plan that reminds me to follow up with them. And then I'm going to create an opportunity in Command. Now, some of you might be used to creating an opportunity only when you're ready to get paid, or when you're ready to create documents. But I personally like to create an opportunity very early on. My reason for that is when you create an opportunity, as soon as somebody tells you they have an intention of buying or selling a home, it puts them on your pipeline, and you're going to have a more accurate idea of how much business you have coming in. Does anybody else do the same thing as I do, like add opportunities really early? I don't see anybody saying yes, try it. It just gives you an accurate pipeline. You know exactly what's coming up. It helps you not forget people. I'm going to add them to a Bright MLS automatic email. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm creating an email in Bright MLS that will send them homes that are for sale. Okay, now I personally typically am having them get the email every single day. Okay, if there's somebody that's buying in the next few months. If they're not going to buy for a year, maybe they're getting the email once a week. Okay, so with Bright, you get to choose how often they are getting the email. Why do you think I'm doing this email, even if they're not going to buy a house for a year? Why do you think I'm doing that?
Just to keep them engaged, I would think.
Mm-hmm. 100%. 100%. If they are getting my email every week, or twice a week or every day, it keeps them involved in the process. Any other, I have one more reason I said to Bright MLS email. Anybody have an idea?
so they can see what inventory is out there.
So they can see what inventory is out there. Yep, that is a very good one. Not the one I'm thinking of. Is there something else?
Also, to put them on a smart plan.
Well, the question is, why are they on a Bright MLS email,
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
even if they don't want to buy right away?
Because if they actually read what Bright tells them, they can do their search through there.
Okay. Yep, they can see a lot of searching there. There's still another reason I'm
Oh wait,
thinking
I
of.
think I have one.
Oh, let's
Because
hear it.
if they see something on that inventory list that they like, they may want to action on it quicker.
Yes, that's it. Exactly. You got it. I knew somebody would guess. Yeah. So here's the thing. Let's say you have a buyer. They say they're not going to buy for a year. Okay. But then you start sending them they get an email through Bright MLS every week, and all of a sudden they see a house and they love it. And this is the one, and they're super interested. They may move things along faster. So Bright is just doing your work for you and getting them to move faster. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and they love it. People love to get those emails. Um, I'm going to send them the consumer apps that they can search for homes on their own using that app. And then over time, I'm going to change the smart plan as necessary. As it gets closer, I'll be in touch with them more often. So maybe at the beginning, it's only once a quarter. Now I'm calling them monthly, whatever it happens to be. Okay. Approximately 4 months from when the time they say they want to buy, I'm going to have the lender reach out to them. The reason I say approximately 4 months is it could change, right? So, for example, let's say I have somebody who has told me that they have some credit challenges. I might actually connect them with the lender even a little earlier because that way the lender might be able to help them with some of those credit challenges. Okay. Or if If they told me 6 months, but I think it might be earlier, maybe I'm going to start them a little earlier. Because when people tell you they want to buy in a certain time, it often happens a lot quicker than that. So, approximately 4 months out, I'm going to have the lender give them a call to get them pre-approved. Now, why am I having the lender call them instead of having them call the lender?
They never
Um,
call the
uh,
lender. They never
They
call the
never
lender.
call the lender, 100%.
In that
Why?
situation now, they never call the lender.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Because they are embarrassed about their credit. They don't want to have that conversation.
Yep. They're embarrassed about their credit. Maybe they don't know what their credit is and they're worried about it. They're afraid, right? They don't, the lender, it just sounds so official, you know? And if they actually talk to them, they're very nice. The lenders are all very nice
Very,
people,
very down to earth. They've seen people in worse situations that they're in. So yeah.
100%. 100%. But it takes off some of the stress from your client. If instead of saying, here are three phone numbers, call these three lenders, if what I do instead is I say, hey, can I have my favorite lender give you a call? Right? And maybe I'll even ask them when a good day is. Um, then the lender will call them. I still will probably send them an email that has three options for lenders in case they want to call someone else. But having one lender give them a call is huge. It'll just speed things up. It'll make it a lot easier for your client, take the some of the fear away from them. And then I'm also going to schedule a buyer strategy session. We're not going to get deep into a buyer strategy session today since that was the topic of our class last week. If you missed last week, the recording is in the coaching community. But I'm going to schedule this buyer strategy session. And sometimes I have them pre-approved before I do the buyer strategy session. Sometimes I do the buyer strategy session first and then get them pre-approved. Sometimes both of those things are sort of happening at the same time. It really doesn't matter. And different clients, you might do it in a different order. What's really important is I want both of those things to happen prior to us looking at houses. So, based on your situation, you might do either one of those first. I'm going to go ahead and schedule my buyer strategy session, update command if I need to make sure the notes are on there, correct smart plan is on there, and you might want to print out your buyer questionnaire. My buyer questionnaire is not something that I'm handing to the buyer to ask them to fill out. Okay. It's something that I'm going to use as a reminder to myself of what to ask my buyer. There are many buyer questionnaires online. You can find one online if you want. We have one in our resources as well. It's kind of just asking them questions about like what their motivation is, why are they moving, what area are they interested in, how many bedrooms, how many baths, all those kinds of things. It's kind of a cheat sheet for you during your appointment. Okay, so I'm going to have this buyer strategy session. Okay, sometimes people will call it a buyer presentation. Make sure you call or text the day before and the same day of appointment. It's unbelievable how people miss appointments, but it happens to me all the time. So I confirm it well in advance. I confirm it the day before, and then even an hour before, if we're driving somewhere or if we're hopping on Zoom, I'm going to send a text. And let me say this is kind of a little bit off topic, but if you have not built a really strong rapport before this meeting, there's a good chance they're not going to show up. Okay, so here's what I mean by that. I don't want to be so quick to schedule this buyer strategy session that I am kind of cutting our conversation short. All right, let's just get like just as an example. Let's say that I had an open house over the weekend, and on Monday or Sunday, I called the buyer. They didn't answer. Call them again Monday. It's Monday, and we're talking. Okay, I probably haven't built enough rapport yet, right? I need to have a conversation there where I'm asking about their motivation, their hopes and dreams. I'm getting to know them. I'm building a connection. Hopefully, I'm making them smile or laugh, right? That's what I want in that meeting is we're going to have a nice meeting where I'm getting the why about what they're moving. I'm getting their motivation, and I'm hoping to build that connection so that they are actually going to attend this meeting that we've scheduled, right? Because if I don't do that, there's a pretty good chance they're not going to show up, especially if it's a stranger. So build that rapport before you do a strategy session. Anyway, that was a little side note. Okay. This list of what documents I need are the documents in Maryland. If you're in DC or Virginia, documents will vary, right? But either way, you're going to figure out which documents you need to have signed for your buyer agency agreement. And my personal preference is if I'm going to be meeting my buyer in person, I just print them out. There's no reason to do DocuSign if you're going to be sitting with that person at Starbucks going through this stuff, right? Just print those things out, have them sign with a pen. Now, you might be doing your buyer strategy session over Zoom. Okay, if you're doing your buyer strategy session on Zoom, then I would have the documents ready to go so that during my Zoom meeting, I can pull them up and we can kind of go through them. Okay, because my hope is and my plan is I want to have those documents signed during my buyer strategy session. All right, so one of the things I'm getting ready in preparing for my buyer strategy session is the documents. I'm also going to want to print out the buyer presentation. You can find that in Command. You can also get it in Canva. If you don't already know how to use the design part of Command, I would just not worry about it and just use Canva. Most people prefer Canva. However, if you know Command really well, it might be quicker for you to just print it in Command. Either way, it's the same document. Do whichever one fits better for you. Has anybody done it before? Does anybody already have a printed buyer presentation that's ready to go? Nobody. Okay.
No.
You got one? No, she says no. Okay. Why not do it now? Okay, because here's the thing. We are at the beginning of the spring market. There's a pretty good chance you're going to have a buyer soon. And that buyer presentation, you don't really have to update it for each buyer. It can be the exact same thing you use for every single buyer. So why not take care of that now so that later you don't have to do it? If anybody isn't sure how to access their Keller Williams templates in Command, send me a text or an email. Don't put it in the chat here because I won't see that later. But if you send me a text or an email, I'm happy to send you the recording of how to do that. You just need to access those Canva templates and you can just print that thing out. No reason not to take care of it like today. You could do it this week and then you're ready. All right.
Hey,
So-
Kirsten, super quick question.
Sure.
Are there still a lot of stats, templates in that printout for different stats of different neighborhoods? Because I do have one, but I ended up not using most of it, and then I didn't feel like I needed it because at the time I didn't know where to get all those stats for the neighborhood for my buyer.
Good point, Dana. Good point. You know what? I personally delete that page. And my reason for deleting it is that I want to have a buyer presentation that I can use for every client. And I don't want to have to update that for every client. So I feel like I can have that information when we're talking about when we're on Bright. So that's my personal preference. But obviously people could do something. Who knows where you get the stats if you wanted to use the stats in the presentation? Any ideas?
In Command or in Canva?
You would search Bright to find the stats.
Oh, in Bright. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Bright and RPR, right? There were some.
RPR, that can help a little bit. Pretty much Bright. Like it depends on what you're looking at. But if you wanted to have in a particular neighborhood, how many active listings are there? You do it in Bright. For me, I personally don't think I need that in my buyer presentation, like that printout. I like to just do that separately. But we all could do something different. I'm glad you brought that up, Dana, because that is kind of an annoying thing to have to change later at the last minute, right? Okay.
I'm sorry, Kristen, you want us to practice, do the buyer presentation in Command or in Canva?
I'm saying if you already don't do Command for designs, it's easier to do Canva. You can the same printout can be done in either one of them. So it's your choice, whichever one you prefer to do.
And send it to you by when is the deadline?
Don't send it to me. It's for you.
Oh, you just saying practice. Okay, I
I'm just saying, it's
misunderstood.
not even practice. I want you to have it ready. So what I'm saying is if you get this buyer presentation ready, then it's just sitting on your computer, and when you get your first buyer, you just can print that thing out. You don't have to spend the time getting it ready.
Okay, understood. Got it.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So my printouts that I'm going to have are the documents they have to sign, that buyer presentation that you can either access in Command or Canva, and then I usually prepare some possible homes. Sometimes I can do this better than others. It just depends on how much conversation I've had with them and how maybe whether they've gotten a pre-approval yet or something like that. But I kind of like to have some idea of, what houses might they be looking at, and then we can look together at some homes that are available. I personally like to do this just if I'm meeting a buyer in person, I'm going to bring my laptop with me and I'm going to log into Bright and we're going to look at some of the homes that might be available. And if they are already pre-approved, you might do something where you meet with them at a Starbucks first, do all of this stuff, and then immediately go look at a house. Okay, because if they've already gotten pre-approved and they signed the buyer agency agreement, you can go right on to looking at a house immediately if you want. Okay, questions before I go on? Okay. All right, so after my buyer strategy session, I'm going to send the signed agreement to my buyer. Even if they sign it in DocuSign and DocuSign sending it's just a nice idea for you to just email them a copy of it with everything in one PDF. Okay. Thank you, text for meeting, and then upload the opportunity for compliance. I'm going to take out the words and submit here because I'm going to suggest it's not important to submit it yet. It's just a good idea just to have it uploaded right now. If for anybody who doesn't know this yet, with compliance, here's what this means, is that anytime you have agreements, we upload them into a command, and when we click submit, somebody looks at them to make sure that we've gotten in all of our signatures and things like that. Okay. It's a really good idea to do that earlier in the process rather than later, because it's really embarrassing if you have to go back to your client for a signature like 4 weeks after they signed the thing, right? So it's just better to kind of do it early. For me, I upload it, but I don't submit it until we have a house that they're putting an offer on. Okay. So once I have a pre-approval from the lender and I have a signed buyer agency agreement, so I've got both of those things done, now we can go look at houses. Okay. So first of all, I might need to update my Bright auto emails at this point, right? Maybe the lender, when we got their pre-approval, maybe the amount is higher or lower than, you know, than whatever the buyer said that they were getting. Maybe they thought they were 400, they got approved for 450 or 350, right? So we might need to change it based on the price. Maybe later they wanted to add some more areas. Okay. And then I'm going to go look at houses. Yeah, Stephanie.
Yes. Is there a class or recording that you've already done for us to view for how to get the auto emails in Bright?
Bright has a recording of it, and it's
Okay, in Bright.
pretty easy. Yep, absolutely. Yep. See, if you can't find it, let me know. But they do have a recording. Thanks for asking that. And if this weren't such a packed class, I would just hop into Bright and show you, but I'm going to try to get through this whole class. I'm going to check in with the lender as I'm looking at houses. Okay, so let's say that you're looking at houses and the buyer has some interest. Okay, so you're showing homes. You go and you look. You've seen 5 houses, house number 5, they have some interest. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is check in with the lender, right? Find out, sometimes there's something that I have to ask the lender about, particularly if there's, if the buyer's getting an FHA loan, maybe I have a question about the house, if it's going to be okay with FHA. A lot of times it's just more about I'm talking about what we're about to offer, like the offer price. So my lender and I are in kind of constant communication as I'm showing homes, right? They know what houses we're seeing and that we're interested in. So if my buyer is interested in a house, I'm going to check in with the lender and get a new pre-approval letter if I need it. Why might I need a new pre-approval letter to write my offer?
It may be outside of their pre-approval window and you may need to get an updated one.
Might be outside the window.
No,
Yeah, why
I
else?
know why. Because you
Go,
never want to show you don't, when you're writing an offer,
okay.
you don't want the seller to see what they're fully pre-approved for.
Yes,
Only what they're offering.
exactly. Okay. So here's what Dallas, perfect. That's exactly what I was going for. So imagine this, your buyer's pre-approved for 500,000. You go out and you look at houses, they want to offer 475 on this house. Okay, I don't want that listing agent to know my buyer can go up to 500. There's no reason for us to reveal that private information, right? So by being in strong communication with your lender, I'm going to text my lender and say, "Hey, we're planning to offer 575. Can you give me a new pre-approval letter?" And that way I'll get a pre-approval letter just with the 575 so that I don't have to reveal anything. Exactly. All right, so I'm going to call the listing agent and I'm asking 2 questions. Question number 1, do they have any offers on the table? Why do I need to know that?
So you can know what to offer based on what your competition may be.
How would that change my offer?
If there's multiple or offers already on the table, you want to go with your strongest and best offer.
Right? Exactly right. Thank you. So in other words, if I call the listing agent, if they tell me there's 10 other offers on the table, we have got to come in with our highest and best. They're probably not going to go back and forth with all 10 offers, right? So we got to come in strong if my buyer really likes this house.
If
Now, on the
there
other
are
hand,
10 offers,
Mhm.
you have to assess how badly your clients want it because they're going to
Sure.
have to really push to win that offer.
Absolutely. 100%. They're going to have a really strong offer if they're going to get it, which maybe they want, maybe they don't, right? Now, on the other hand, if I call the other agent and ask that question and they say, we have one other offer, then it's a little different scenario. If they have one other offer, it might even be a really bad offer. We don't know how good the offer is. So maybe in that situation where there are 0 offers or just one offer, probably that agent will be able to negotiate a little bit back and forth. So it is crucial to know how many offers are on the table. And if I can, I try to find out how many. Yes, I know. Do you have a question?
Hi, sorry, just a kind of scenario-based question. Is there a risk where you ask that question from the listing agent and for a listing agent to basically make their listing more appealing, they tell you an incorrect number of offers? Is that something that happens?
I don't think it does a lot. You really, as an agent, can't lie. Now, what they could say is, I don't have any on the table now, but I'm expecting 3.
Hmm.
That can be puffing. In other words, 3 people kind of told them they were. That doesn't mean they're going to get 3. But they really can't lie. I don't have any way of knowing if agents have lied. But I think in a way it's bad for them if they lie because it could make me not even send an offer if I thought they had a whole bunch. Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
And
Yeah,
and Kirsten,
yeah.
and one of the things I had happen sometimes is they they give you more information because they're trying to get the house sold.
Yeah,
And in the background, you don't know if somebody's getting divorced. And you don't
right.
know all the scenarios, but they'll give you a little bit more information, then you have a little bit more to work with. And
Absolutely. Sometimes they give you information they shouldn't, Yeah, but you never know what you're going to find out. So yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Kirsten, super quick question. Just in those scenarios, I just want to confirm that even if there are 10 offers on the table for the house they're interested in,
Mhm.
and the best thing that they can do, like you feel like it's still not going to get them the house, we're still like definitely required to submit their offer if that's what they want. Like if they want us to put it through, we put it through. Like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
If they want you to write it, you write it. Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Thank you. And I do, I do kind of let my buyer know what I think, right?
Right.
About their chances. Because really we want to get it for them. But honestly, you never know. You never know when yours is going to be the offer. So we do it, right? Okay, so I'm calling the listing agent. Want to know if there are any other offers on the table. I try to find out how many offers they have on the table. And then I'm going to ask if there's an offer deadline. Why do I want to know that?
Because
Because if
that's
there's a deadline,
go ahead, Michelle.
if there's a deadline, you have to get that contract in within that deadline. Because once
Yep,
that deadline has taken, they're not going to take it anymore.
that's
You could
right.
cost your client a property.
Exactly. We really need to ask that because like Michelle just said, we don't want to cost our client a property, right? By us being too slow. Um, I have, and that's so important, right? So sometimes you're going to call and they're going to say, yes, there's a deadline and it's, today at 5 p.m., right? Who knows when it's going to be? Um, it happens a lot. Typically, if an agent puts a deadline on an offer, that means that they already have an offer in hand that they're planning to accept. Typically, you're not going to see a deadline unless that's the case, although it might not always be. Yeah, Dallas.
Also, sometimes agents will put them in Bright MLS as well on the listing. They'll say like
Yep,
accepting offers through like X date. So just keep that in
exactly.
mind too.
Yes, very good point. A lot of times it'll say it in bright. And if you've shown the house as an agent, a lot of times you'll get an email through showing time because the listing agent can, in showing time, send an email to everybody who showed the house saying, offers deadline XYZ. Okay, so you usually will get notified, but best to ask the question right now so that you have as much notice as possible. And for those of you who are working with a coach, this is the time to definitely reach out to your coach immediately. One of the problems that we sometimes run into is sometimes an agent will start working on their offer, and they're going and they're, doing all the work and putting the offer together. But if they haven't told their coach this, we can run into trouble. Like, what if you need my help and I don't know you're writing an offer and I'm out hiking, right? Like, I just need to know it up front. So tell your coach right away if this is the situation so that we can help as best as we can. Okay, next question I'm going to ask. Other than price, what's important to the seller? Super important question. I have gotten my clients houses that I don't think they would have gotten. I've gotten contracts accepted because of that question. I've gotten deals for my clients because of that question. Because sometimes I think we can assume, I think we assume that sellers want to move as quickly as possible for the most money. And that's not always the case. Sometimes something else is more important. Can anybody think of some things that might be more important to a seller than just top dollar quickest settlement? Yeah, Michelle.
They have a child in school. They want to stay to the end of the school
Hmm.
year, but they want to
Yeah,
get their house right on the market right away so they can get to
yeah. Okay. So sometimes they might not want to move as quickly as possible. Maybe they don't want to move until a certain date. And probably they put that in the agent notes. And if you read the agent notes, you'll know that. But maybe not. You might find something out different. Yeah. Anybody else have any other ideas of what other things might happen here?
They might
Sometimes,
need
oh,
flexibility. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Dana. They might need flexibility. And what kind of flexibility?
For a contingency, like if they're selling but they can't actually move out until they buy a house.
Yes. So they might need some flexibility with when settlement is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. Anybody
I was
else
gonna
think of?
say, if like if they know the buyer and
Yeah.
they know and trust the buyer, they might take a lower offer
Okay.
just because they know the person. And
Yeah.
they
And
want they want that person to move into the house.
so typically the buyer and seller don't ever talk to each other. So that's not going to come up real often. you know, but I could imagine a scenario where it does.
But it might be the case that one buyer has a more secure offer, like they have a higher down payment, or they have a
Yep.
higher earnest money, or there's some indication that that deal
Yeah.
is more likely not to fall apart.
Yeah, definitely. So then the question is, so what we're talking about now is why we ask the question, other than price, what's important to the seller? Like, what are we why are we saying that, and what can we get from that? That's where we're going with this.
I would say like sometimes like I had this in my case with my client. The seller didn't want to like prepare anything in the house.
Yes.
We wanted, so that was something that we had to work through because that was part of their plan. They wanted to sell the house pretty quickly.
Okay, perfect example. So if you asked that question in the beginning, you would know to submit your offer, inspections are for informational purposes only, right? So if you send an offer that says inspections for informational purposes only, somebody else sends an offer, exact same price, exact same settlement date, but it doesn't have that and they want regular inspections, your offer's probably getting accepted instead of the other one, just from that simple question. Another one that has saved my buyers money is I've had sellers who had a lot of stuff in the house, right? I one time I had this I was selling this house. It was a waterfront property, enormous house filled with furniture. Okay, and the seller, it was a for sale by owner. And so I had spoken to her and I knew she was moving to Florida because she was a for sale by owner. So I got to talk to the seller directly. She definitely would have earned more money had she used a real estate agent because she just was a for sale by owner, so she was talking to me. And I was able to get the price reduced $70,000, $70,000 reduction by agreeing that she could just leave things in the house that she didn't want. Okay, and I knew that by talking to the seller. So in this case, there was no agent. I knew what was important to her was just that she had a house full of stuff and it was overwhelming to her to try to figure out how to get rid of all this furniture and everything. Well, my client, this was going to be a vacation home for them. They didn't mind having a whole bunch of furniture there, right? Even if they didn't like all of it, they didn't have furniture, so it was a benefit to them to have all this furniture there and then just over time replace it. She left a lot of other junk too, so they had stuff to get rid of, but we got $70,000 off the sales price because of that. So it was huge because I found that out. I've had sellers want a quicker settlement. Sellers want a slower settlement. Sellers want a rent back, right? When my son bought a house last year, one of the ways we got the deal done is we gave them a free week rent back. It didn't really matter to him. He was fine with that. But for them, that was a big deal because that gave them time to move. So other than price, what's important to the seller, listen and find out, read the agent notes. There might be something in the agent notes that tells you what's important to the seller. And then we also want to find out what commission, if any, the seller is offering. You're going to need to know that. Okay, questions on that so far before we go any further? Okay, all right. I'm going to create a CMA for the homes the buyer is writing an offer on. Why am I doing that?
Because you want the
To
buyer
make
to see
sure
like,
that they're offering fair market value.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Dallas? Were you saying something different?
well, fair market value, but you also want to make sure that they're not going to be overspending for the house, really, depending on because I had a situation years ago where a client was trying to buy a house and the seller was selling it for like 700,000. But a lot of the other homes in the area were only selling for like 600.
Right.
So things like that come up sometimes too.
Yeah. And it can affect the appraisal, right? It's not going to appraise. And so we would want to know that up front, if we might run into appraisal issues. Yeah, so we'll create a CMA. If I'm requesting a seller commission, I need to confirm that it's within limits. Okay, anybody know what I mean by that?
No. No.
Oh, yeah, just checking in case. Okay,
Is
so
it
I
like
would say
when the
confirm.
semi? Oh, Go sit down.
Go
I
ahead,
would
Fatima.
Go
I
sit
would
down.
say to
Go ahead, Stephanie.
I would say that basically means that you want to make sure that they're asking for whatever the seller is willing to give as
It's a
far as
little
a seller
different.
concession.
It's a little different than that. So here's what it is. With each type of loan, there's a maximum seller concession. Okay, it might be like 3% or it might be 4%. With an FHA loan, it could be 6%. Okay, but that maximum is not only for, it's going to include not only a seller help at the beginning, but even if I want to try to get repairs later. Okay, there's going to be a maximum seller concession. And if you negotiate a seller concession that's higher than that, your client can't accept it. So you negotiated something that they're not even going to benefit from. So this is important. When I'm sending an offer, before I write this offer, I text my lender with all of the details, right? So here's the address, here's the price we're offering, here's a settlement date, here's a seller concessions, and anything else you think is pertinent. Just text a lender and say, is this okay? The lender might say, oh, since they're using this grant, we need a little more time, or that seller concession's too high. Okay, so there could be something like that. Questions about that?
I do have a
I
question.
do have
Is there a way to separate the seller concession with the say for example, if there is any contingency, for example, fixes that needs to be done, do they ever combine the two into one?
No, the loan type limits how much seller concession there can be. And
Okay.
so if you have already gotten that much seller concession from, as at the beginning, then later on the seller's just going to need to make the repair. They can't give the seller a credit, the buyer a credit. Yeah, Dallas.
Sorry. One thing I was going to say was about the credit too, because sometimes the seller concessions, depending on how much the seller is offering to you, could affect like any grant money that you're getting from like a program or something.
Right.
So like, because sometimes if it's more than a certain amount, like you may have to choose between one or the other. I know that's how it was for me.
Yes.
And one of my friends. So that's something to keep in mind too.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. Jeanette.
Yeah, I didn't catch this before I was on the phone. Do you do this with the lender before you put in the offer or right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you
before
won't
I
have to
write
go
the
through all
offer.
that.
Yeah, before I write the offer, I send a text to the lender with the details of my offer so that the lender can confirm all of them. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Stephanie.
So my question would be, if the maximum amount for your example is like 6%, is that something that the seller has to honor, or can they say we're only giving 3%? Like, how
Yeah,
does that work?
Yeah, they don't have to give any at all.
Okay,
Yeah, but you're not allowed to accept more than whatever the maximum is.
got it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. Yeah, and this talking with the lender thing, that is going to save you so much heartache if you're just in communication with the lender. I've seen too many times where an agent might, just they're doing their thing, they're writing an offer. They don't know that, that wouldn't work for whatever the loan is, and they can waste their time, right? And it can disappoint the buyer if they go so far writing an offer and then find out it's not going to work. I'm going to expand this, not just concessions, but just any terms. I should change what I have written here because it could be all sorts of things. For example, condominiums, right? A condominium, if it's an FHA loan, has to be like FHA approved, right? So you want to, if it's a condo, reaching out to your lender, is this one okay? Right? Because FHA won't approve that condo if too many people are behind on their condo fees or they don't have enough reserves, right? So there can be issues with condos with FHA. You might have a situation where a house needs some repairs and you're not sure if it will pass VA loan or FHA loan. there can be so many things that can happen in a transaction. And so that's why if you are in coaching, it's important to keep your coach aware of what's going on so that your coach can kind of watch for these things for you. But also be in constant communication with the lender before you write the offer so that those red flags are handled before you're already in the process. That's kind of the big thing. Yeah, really important. Any other questions on that or comments or anything? Good
Kirsten, I
discussion.
have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything, I mean, I see a lot of things about this process that would be different if someone is making a cash offer, but as far as like, I don't know, your ability to negotiate or any of those things that we've kind of talked about in regards to preparing an offer, is there anything like big that you would see being different if they're making a cash offer?
Really good question. Okay, so first of all, a cash offer, sellers love that, right? So if it's a cash offer, they love it because they just, with a loan, the buyer's financing can change and things can fall through, right? There's just too many things that are up in the air. With a cash offer, it's just more solid. So if I were making,
However,
go ahead.
cash offer does not entitle the buyer to a discount, which I've had buyers think they get because they're doing cash.
Right. And some people might, it depends on the seller. Some people may may accept a lower offer of cash. They might not. Okay, it's up to the seller, right? But a cash offer is strong because we don't have to go through financing. Also, a cash offer oftentimes can be quicker, and the seller might like that. It's because a cash offer, we don't have to wait for financing. We just need to wait for the title to do their job, right? So maybe the cash offer will be quicker. One thing I would say that is a little different with a cash offer that I often see is you can add an addendum for a cash appraisal contingency. Okay, because if you were getting a loan, an appraisal is kind of part of that loan. But if you are making a cash offer, you don't have the right for an appraisal contingency unless you have that in writing prior to when you send the offer. So that would be a really good thing to think about adding. I am thinking of one time I was on the listing side and a buyer was paying cash and did not include that contingency. Turned out he wasn't actually paying cash cash. He had a hard money loan. Hard money lender did an appraisal and it appraised low, and he ended up losing his earnest money because he had not put that addendum in, but he really wanted it.
Does that addendum just mean that they can still get an appraisal, like the seller can expect the buyer to get an appraisal and they still have to wait for them to do that even though they're
Yep.
making a cash offer? Okay.
Yeah, they get an appraisal, and if the appraisal comes in low, then they have the opportunity to negotiate and get out of the
Okay.
contract if they want to. Yeah, so it would be a really good idea to add for certain cash buyers. And then also, many cash buyers are investors. Sometimes they choose to also waive the inspection. It depends on your buyer. I personally try not to get buyers to waive the inspection unless they are investors. I work with a lot of investors and they don't need to do an inspection because of their comfort level with houses. So it's completely up to them. Some buyers are like, that would worry me a little bit. Yeah, Jeanette.
Okay, I have a question. With a cash buyer, I don't know if this sounds off the wall or not. How do you know they really have the cash?
Oh, good question. Does anybody want to answer before I do?
You can ask for
You
proof
ask.
of funds.
That's right.
Mhm.
Ask for proof of funds. Actually, I just got a cash offer accepted yesterday. You send proof of funds. You send a copy of the bank statement showing the money's there instead of a pre-approval letter. Yep.
I
Good
had a question.
Yeah.
Well, when you referring to this cash buyer and you said they didn't ask that they didn't put the addendum in there for the which addendum are you referring to? I'm just trying
Cash
to take notes.
appraisal.
Cash appraisal?
They didn't ask for an appraisal. That wasn't part of our contract.
Okay, thank you.
Jeanette, did you have another question or is your hand just okay, cool. Didn't want to go past you if you did. Any other questions before we go on that? Good thoughts, everybody. All right. So we get this offer together, right? So we've talked to the listing agent, right? We ask some questions. We talk to the lender, we've talked to our client, we get this offer together. Um, this is my time to plug practicing writing offers. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm gonna say this about like pretty much every single day. So here it goes again. You got to practice. It is just horrible for agents who don't practice. It can be very stressful, and you might not get things done on time. Um, Sometimes deadlines are quick, especially in the spring market. I have sometimes had to write an offer sitting in my car using my hotspot because offers were due so soon. So I think that you should be able to write an offer in under an hour. And I want you to be able to do that before you have a buyer client. Okay, so if you aren't there yet, that's fine. Like not everybody is. Maybe you just haven't practiced yet. But let's get on that now so that you can save yourself some heartache later. Because what happens is when you get a client, things can move really fast. And sometimes it can be overwhelming. Like you're looking at houses, you look at 5 houses, they want to write an offer, offers are due in 2 hours. You don't have time to learn how to write an offer if you already have a client. It goes super fast. The first time someone writes an offer, it can usually take, a good 5 hours or so to write it the first time. And the reason is not that it's difficult. DocuSign part isn't difficult. There's all these templates. You're not having to do anything from scratch. The part that takes agents so long is figuring out which documents they need to include as part of the offer, and then reading and understanding all of those documents and learning what you're supposed to put in on the blank line. Okay.
I would also say making sure everything is completely filled out.
Making sure everything's completely filled out. Yeah. As someone who reviews a lot of offers, you are absolutely right. It's really easy to miss things. And you might misunderstand what something means, right? So don't delay this. Like practice now. For those of you who coach with me, you know the way I do it. I'm your pretend buyer, and we just practice, right? So you pretend I want to buy a house. You're actually going to write a full offer. I'm going to review it. We're going to do the entire process. And if you do that a few times, you're going to feel comfortable. But if you wait to do it until you have a client, you're going to be very stressed out. Stephanie was one who practiced a lot. And right, Stephanie? And didn't you feel like that helped you a lot?
It helped me tremendously, and I still don't have it down packed, but it was a great help that you said do it before it was time. So thank you for that.
Yeah, because even if you have a little question right now, it's not going to ruin your whole weekend.
I was gonna say also the notes that you gave, like when I did it with you and you gave me the notes and feedback, like that helped me when I wrote my first offer.
There you go. Yeah.
It made it easier to write quicker.
Yeah. For your second one, you do quicker. Yes, I know. What did you want to say?
No, I was gonna ask because I'm at a stage where I'm practicing, but I need to kind of reconfirm a few things with my coach. That's the step that's pending. So I need to review one that's kind of creates a template for myself. So when I practice, I understand like what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions about the various dates, like what do you put?
Yeah.
Is there a video on that? Is there like a best practice video or something that you can?
Yeah. So online,
I don't have to constantly
tell
my coach. So
sure. No, but actually that's what your coach is there for. Like all of us want to answer your questions. So don't feel like you shouldn't. Okay. Like really that we want to answer questions. On the Life at KWCP website, there are some videos. We are getting more because, sorry. Okay. Contract tutorials. These are Maryland Association of Realtors documents. We are trying to get the documents for other jurisdictions as well. Okay, but I totally get it. It's really tough when you're trying, there's so many things on there, like earnest money. How many days should I put? How much should the earnest money be? Like all those kinds of things. Now, AI is very helpful with this. Like if you have not tried using ChatGPT to answer some of these questions, try it because it does a pretty good job and then you can have your coach review it. So I would absolutely say to do that. But yeah, if if you don't practice, it can be very, very difficult. I've seen too many agents in tears and ruining their weekend, you know? Comments, questions about that? All right. So we're going to write an offer. We're going to send the offer in a single PDF in a proper order. Okay, that's important. If your offer looks messy, sellers notice, you know? By messy, what I mean is I don't want the documents in just some random order. Okay, there's sort of an order things go in. And typically it's like this. Typically, you'll have the pre-approval first, or a cash deal would be a proof of funds might be first. Okay. And then I usually have the sales contract. And then I usually have documents about money, anything about money. And then I might have documents about inspections, and then a whole bunch of disclosures. So that's kind of a general order. But in general, it's just sort of the important things first and all the disclosures at the end. And in your email, when you're sending it to the other agent, in that email, you want to detail, just to make it easier, here are the highlights of my offer. Sales price, settlement date, how many days inspections, how much is the earnest money, am I asking for a seller concession, whatever the top details are, it's polite to put those in an email, and that's kind of generally how it goes. Okay, so you wrote an offer, you sent it off to the listing agent. Okay, typically, the listing agent will respond to you saying that they received it. Okay, so you'll usually get an email back saying just received. Okay, they're going to say that whether it's a good offer or a bad offer, they just do it like that. And then you're kind of waiting, right? For your client to get back to your client wants to know, do I have this house? You're waiting on the listing agent. It is pretty common for the listing agent to get back within 24 hours. I would certainly expect that. I have seen situations where it takes a lot longer. Hopefully, if it's going to be longer than that, the listing agent would reach out to you and say something like, I don't know, my client's whole family has the flu. They said they're going to get back to you tomorrow, or whatever it is, whatever the reason is. Hopefully, they will reach out to you. But if not, you can reach out to the listing agent because we really do need a response. Your client wants to go out and look for another house if they aren't getting this one. So we do want to hear back. And typically they will get back to you within the first 24 hours. All right, let's say it's accepted. All right. Everything I'm going to talk about from this point on, for those of you who are using a transaction coordinator, the transaction coordinator might be doing some of these things. But not every transaction coordinator is exactly the same. So I don't want to sit and say, oh, yes, the transaction coordinator does this, and then yours doesn't. Okay, so you're going to have to talk to your own transaction coordinator and find out which of these following things they want to do. Yeah, Alfonso.
I've heard about transaction coordinators a lot, and people are like, you're going to need one at one point. Who are they and what are they?
Yeah, good question.
I have one.
Yeah.
So bullpen management is one that we use. I think it's one of the ones at Keller Williams Legacy, at least.
Yeah.
I used Julie for my most recent transaction.
Yep.
Best experience ever because she literally took care of everything once the offer was accepted, and all I had to do was kind of play quarterback a little bit. It was nice. It was a lot of pressure taken off of me once that happened. So definitely worth investing in.
Anybody who's working with me, you're going to hear me say, you're using a transaction coordinator, right?
I agree with Dallas. Julie was amazing from bullpen management. She made my life so much easier. I totally agree.
Yep.
And see, I personally want to, be able to master that, but at some point down the line, I know I'll have them, but I don't want to sit right now. I want to be able to master that portion of it, all of it if possible.
Yeah, so what I usually tell agents is do the first couple with the transaction coordinator because then you're going to see what they do. You're copied on everything, so you kind of learn the whole process. And then try doing a couple yourself. But then busy agents always use a transaction coordinator. Top agents are not doing this paperwork themselves because it's a lot of hours. And for those of you who are dual career, you might be at your day job and stuff's just still happening even while you're at work. To find the transaction coordinator, we've got them right here. Okay, so this transaction coordinator service, the one that says website here, that's Julie, that's Bullpen. There's also this one. Like there's two of them right here.
And what's the percentage, or they have a flat rate, or they're all different, I'm assuming?
They all have a flat rate, but they're
That
not all
right.
exactly the same, right? So expect the flat rate to be somewhere around $400 or $500.
That's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the hours I'm
It's
putting into
absolutely worth it, given the amount of time it's going to take you. They handle everything, and most importantly, you're kind of making sure that you are kind of doing everything you're supposed to be doing, and the transaction stays together. And they're, just they handle so much, All right. All right, so offer gets accepted. All right, your buyer signs, and then you're going to send the contract to the listing agent if you were the last one to sign. Because here's the thing, it might be as contracts go back and forth, either party could be the last one to sign. Right? So whoever signs last sends it over to the other party. All right, so you're going to call your buyer and congratulate them. You're going to send it to the transaction coordinator. And then either you or the transaction coordinator, somebody needs to send that ratified contract to the buyer, the lender, and the title company, and everybody needs it right away. All right, so why do they need it right away?
Because they have to start their processes.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to start running, looking for liens, anything they have, especially with title, they need everything. Because
yes,
depending on what you put in that contract,
absolutely,
how many days you're gonna close, you have to be ready. And I tell anybody, having a transaction coordinator sets you apart from any other agent.
There you go.
Because they sit there, they help you. I had Julie before. They help you with everything, and they're gonna think, oh wow, she has somebody. They don't even know that she doesn't work for you, but they'll think, oh, she has somebody working with her, who's doing all my paperwork. They were like, oh wow, she's fancy. So
I love that. Yep. So we send the ratified contract to the buyer, the lender, and the title company. The loan is usually the longest piece. So we want that lender to get started on this immediately.
Right away.
But even the title company, that can take a little while. And if there's any problems, we want everybody to have as much time as possible. So immediately send that. And then we're going to upload the ratified contract to the opportunity and submit it for compliance. Okay, here's the thing. Unless everything is approved, you're not going to get paid. Before you get paid, all of the documents have to be approved. Okay, need all your signatures. It's really embarrassing to go back to your buyer, when the contract is already closed and say, oh, we missed this signature on page 23. It's a lot easier to take care of that immediately. So what I'm going to say you do is as soon as you get that ratified contract, go ahead and submit it for compliance. Then it's taken care of. There's no reason to wait on that. Just get it taken care of now so that if there's an issue, you can take care of it right away. And then whether or not you're using a transaction coordinator, you need to know the important dates. Okay. I need to know, when is my earnest money due? By when do my inspections need to be done? I'm going to add one more in here. The financing commitment. Okay, that you might need as well. And then settlement. And so what a lot of us do, a lot of us have like a whiteboard in our office that has these dates on it. You might put them on your Google Calendar. Put them in more than one place. We need these dates to be like top of mind. What happens if you miss your inspection contingency deadline? Anybody know?
You miss your opportunity to have the property inspected for your buyer.
All right, I muted because I had to sneeze and forgot to unmute. Yeah, either maybe you got an inspection. You can't ask for anything to be fixed if you miss that deadline. You missed it. Now you're accepting.
Missed the opportunity to renegotiate.
You miss the opportunity to renegotiate. This is huge. That deadline matters. And so make sure you know what those dates are and definitely get them in on time. I try to get them in earlier than my deadline, just so if something happens, I'm not stuck. Very important. So I'm adding these dates. I'm going to put these dates in more than one place and make sure that they're top of mind for me. If you're using a transaction coordinator, that person is also doing the same thing, but you need them too. And I'm going to email that list of deadlines to the buyer as well so that they know when everything is due. Buyers sometimes don't realize how important these deadlines are, right? So if your earnest money needs to be in by a certain time, like they just need to do it, you know? We need to communicate to them that they really just need to be right on top of it.
I agree because I had my very first buyer, and he thought he can just, oh, I'll send my earnest money like next week. And I'm like, no, it's a certain deadline that it
Right.
has to be in by. So that's crucial to explain that to a buyer.
Yeah, 100%. I think when you have your first client, you realize a whole bunch of stuff that you're gonna, do differently next time. Yeah.
I worked with an agent. I don't remember now whether I was the listing or the buyer's agent, but the other side had a transaction coordinator that put all those dates and everything in the list and shared it with both of us, which I
Yeah.
thought was really helpful. Like, how
Yeah.
nice. Like, why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah, I have that a lot too. I think that's great. It's very nice. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, Jeanette.
What happens if once like the offer's put in and everybody accepts it, when it comes time for the earnest money deposit, if the buyer says, "Oh, I don't have it all."
Well, they're in default at that point.
Okay.
Okay, they're in default. And so then we would get the broker involved. There might be some legal things happening. They might lose it. Like I don't know exactly how it would turn out, but they would be in default.
Is that what they say in the book when you sue for a specific performance? Is that what that is?
I think specific performance, yes, that's what this is. I don't know if it would get to that point because this would have just gotten under contract, so probably everybody would just, agree to separate. But yes, they could be sued, you know? They could be sued. Yeah, I think, and like Stephanie was saying, so much of this is just on us to communicate to our client, here's how much it is, and it has to be on this date. Right.
Would you tell your client that if they say they have the money and then after you put in the offer and it's accepted, that if they do something like that, there's a possibility that the buyer could be sued where you don't even go there?
I wouldn't go there unless I had reason to think they might not do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have a buyer that pulls that every once in a while, and I don't know what to do.
Well, yeah, so if you have a buyer where you suspect that, then you need to be more upfront about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it just depends on what your past experience has been with that client, I guess,
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then I arrange for the buyer to submit the earnest money. Did you want to say something, Fatima?
Yes, please. Hi. So if a particular buyer is interested in like two different houses and wants to see which one they will accept the offer or something, can you simultaneously put in offer for two different houses, but you can only do one?
I do not think you should have two offers out on houses unless the buyer is going to buy two. Like you have an investor client who might buy two houses, that's fine. But if you have a homeowner buyer and they're only going to buy one house, they should be writing an offer on one house at a time. Because if both of them get accepted, they're going to be in trouble there, right? They're not going to be able to buy both houses. A good question. Thank you. All right. So now I'm going to arrange for my buyer to submit the earnest money deposit. If a title company is holding the earnest money, which if you're at KWCP, you have to have the title company hold the earnest money deposit. If you're at Keller Williams Legacy, it can either be the broker or the title company holding the deposit. Okay. However, if you have the title company hold the earnest money deposit, most of them have a way for the buyer to submit the deposit electronically. They'll be able to just transfer the money electronically. Much easier that way. Back in the day, we used to like pick up a check and drive it around, and you can still do that at Legacy. You can still, and actually, I guess at a title company too, much easier if they're going to just transfer it electronically. I would absolutely recommend you do it that way. And then if a title company is holding the earnest money, then they need to sign the escrow agreement. that says that they've received the earnest money. You're going to get that escrow agreement signed by the title company, and I'm going to add this in here. You're going to send it to the listing agent. Okay, because that's kind of your proof that the earnest money has been received. You might also have some kind of electronic receipt, but even if you have that, you still need to complete the escrow agreement. All right, so we're under contract. We've gotten our earnest money in. Next, we got to get these inspections going, right? Because you probably only have maybe 5 days, maybe 7 days, maybe 10 days. You only have a certain amount of time to do your inspections. So I would have, for myself, I probably would have sent this list already to my buyers if they want to just check out the website of a few different inspectors. Okay, because we want the buyer to be happy with whoever they choose for the inspection. And then I'm going to schedule the inspection. If the house is occupied, I'm going to need to include the listing agent in that to make sure it's the time that works for the sellers as well. And I want to do that as early in my process as makes sense, right? I want to give myself enough time, right? So in other words, if I only have 5 days for my inspections, or I have 7 days for my inspections, if I get those inspections done early, it gives me more time. Let's say that in the inspection, something electrical comes up and I want to find out how much that costs so I can decide if that's something we want to ask the seller to fix or not. It gives me more time to find that out. So you can still do it at the end, but it's a little bit easier on you if you do your inspections a little bit early. While we're I'm going to talk more about inspections here, so I won't get into all of it, but in this list, we're going to schedule the inspection. And I also discuss with the buyer the do's and don'ts of financing. This is in that buyer presentation. And I really want to mention this because I have occasionally seen situations where a deal falls through because the buyer does something stupid. Like, I'll just say it like that. Like, they got under contract and they go out to a furniture store and get a furniture store credit card and buy a whole bunch of furniture for that new house. What might happen if they did that?
It's going to affect the credit check.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because I thought sometimes buyers think that once they're pre-approved, they're just pre-approved. But this pre-approval can fall through all the way up till settlement. True story, my daughter bought a house in 2020, and the house she bought, the transaction had been the house had been under contract with a different buyer, and that transaction had fallen through the day before settlement. The sellers already had all of their belongings in a moving truck, and the deal fell through. And the reason it fell through was that those prior buyers, before my daughter bought it, I guess they just stopped paying bills and everything. Like, their credit went down. They stopped worrying about their pre-approval once they got under contract. And that's just not the case. The lender's still going to keep checking the credit. So it's really important for your buyer. Don't open any credit cards. Don't pay off any credit cards. Don't spend a whole bunch of money. Just kind of lie low until settlement. Yes, I know. What were you going to ask?
Just to understand the role of my role as an agent and also the transaction coordinator's role, among all these tasks post contract approval, which ones are done by them and which ones are done by me? Like, how do I kind of separate out the responsibility?
Not every transaction coordinator is the same. And so I can't tell you with certainty which ones are always done. For example, some transaction coordinators will actually schedule the inspection for you, but not everyone will. Okay, so I think this is a good conversation point with your transaction coordinator, just to find out exactly which ones they would do. Thank you for asking that, though. I wish it were more clear, but everybody's just a little different in what they offer, you know.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right. I'm going to ask the buyer for a review now. We haven't even sold this house. Why in the world am I asking for a review?
You want to get them while they're still excited about the process.
Yes, exactly. They're excited. Right. This is the perfect time for ask for a review. They're excited. We haven't had the inspection yet. We haven't gone through all these hurdles and ups and downs. Ask for a review. Ask for a referral. Right now, they're super excited. The title company is going to send you probably a form that you'll complete online. It might be a PDF, but usually it's just some online form through the system called Qualia. They're going to ask you some questions about the transaction, how much your commission is there a home warranty, what is the contact info for your clients, those kinds of things. So do that as soon as you get it so that you don't delay the process. And then make sure that when the buyer has sent in their earnest money deposit, that you send a copy of it to the lender. Okay, so I just want to point out, we showed homes, once the offer gets accepted, all of this stuff happens within a couple days. Like you're doing all this pretty fast. Okay, this is when it gets really, really busy with your buyer. And then we have the inspection, and this might be the next day. It might be 2 days. So we're still like really in the hurry up mode. Okay. All right, we're going to confirm the inspection times of the buyer and the listing agent. I confirm, especially with the listing agent, if the house is, occupied, then we really need to coordinate with that. You know what? Let me just add something to this. Make sure the utilities are on. Okay. And appliances. Sorry. This is why I have to add things, like I just think of things as I'm doing it. All right.
I love how they say agents don't do anything. I want to show somebody this checklist. Like, you tell me you can do this and this and this and this, and say agents don't do
it. Right?
This is a lot.
It is a lot.
It's cool though, but
so all of this used to be in my head, and I'm putting it on paper. And so that's why that's why I keep thinking of things, because what was happening is I would just do all this stuff and I was just doing it, but now I made a checklist so it can be repeated. Okay, so I'm confirming the inspection time with the listing agent the day before. Make sure the utilities are on and the appliances are plugged in. The inspector will not plug in the dryer. Okay, now I have plugged in the dryer before. The inspector won't do it because if it's not already done. And utilities need to be on, the water needs to be turned on, the electricity needs to be turned on. If somebody lives there, no big deal. These things are probably already on. But if it's maybe a recently rehabbed house and it's vacant, they might have the water shut off, right? They might not have the washing machine connected. You might have a brand new washing machine sitting there that's not connected. Okay, so the inspector will not test anything, of course, if it's not plugged in, and they are unwilling to turn things on or plug things in. So just confirm all of that in advance. You and your buyer should attend the home inspection. Your client, if they can't be there the whole time, it's fine to just be there at the end to talk to the inspector. But one of the most important things about having the buyer there is you want the buyer to be asking all of their questions to the inspector, not to you. Okay? You are the person that has, Alfonso, you actually said this straight up, like when we were in that session with the home inspector last week. You're just kind of the resource, right? How did you say it? I forget.
The resource library.
You're the resource library. Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to be the one who knows stuff about mold. I don't want to be the one who knows stuff about hot water heaters, whatever it is. I want my client to talk to the.
My aunt is really, she's actually going through a situation like this now because she had a new construction. She had 2 new constructions. Her first one she had issues with, and her one she has now she has issues with. And I said, well, were you a part of the home inspection? And she started yelling at me, and I said, you weren't. Because now she has a whole bunch of issues, but she can't find access panels, she can't find this. And I was like, yeah, you weren't there. So yeah, she's going through it.
Wow. Yeah. Stan, what were you going to say?
I was going to ask a quick question about being at the inspection with the buyer. The buyer could have a day job. The agent can also be a dual career agent. Do we schedule these inspections after hours?
Most inspectors are doing them during the daytime during the week. I think you're going to have a hard time finding one to do one in an evening.
It depends on the
Okay.
inspector. You
Yeah, it
can,
depends. Sure.
weekends
And
are more possible than
And
evenings.
evenings for sure. And a lot of things, and inspectors also, they're not going to want to do it it gets dark so early until daylight savings time. They're not really going to be able to see the roof, if we're not doing it during the daytime. It takes,
Right.
and Kirsten,
yeah.
I just wanted to say some agents, because I've been paid before to take a buyer to a home inspection. If you can't go and you pay
Right.
somebody, another agent will
You
go
can
on your
you
behalf.
can pay another agent to handle it for you. Yep, exactly. Um, absolutely. Um, Takes a couple of hours for the home inspection. It depends on the size of the property. I've seen if it's a townhouse, it, could be an hour and a half or something like that. Sometimes if the house has problems, it'll be longer. Like an older home sometimes can be a little bit longer, but assume up to maybe 3 hours if it's a larger property. But your buyer definitely should be there, at least for the last hour, because we really, really, really want them to fully understand what it says on the report. And sometimes they can ask questions when we're standing right there with the inspector. They can show it. They can say, oh, here it is. The buyer just gets so much more clarity by attending it as it's happening. Um, Inspectors will typically also, at the end, they usually say to the buyer, here's my card, give me a call if you have any questions. Encourage your buyer to call the inspector directly with their questions instead of trying to do it through you.
Okay. Thank
We're
you.
the resource library here. We're not the inspector, right? We have to be really careful. I personally find, a lot of times we're at an inspection and I know something just because I've been in real estate for so long. I have to make a conscious effort to say to the buyer, why don't we ask the inspector about this? This looks like, whatever it is about the house. Instead of me saying, that looks like termites, I'll say, let's ask the inspector if this is, or if this is a termite issue or whatever it happens to be. I want to not be the expert. From a liability standpoint, I'm an agent, so I can't be the expert. Okay.
Yeah.
You might have more than one home inspection, more than one type of inspection happening. So a structural mechanical is the normal just home inspection. When you hear a home inspection, that's what we're talking about, structural and mechanical. You're going to get a report that's really long, but structural mechanical deals with, all the systems, does the heat, air conditioning, the roof, the windows, all the appliances, all the plumbing, electrical. They're going to do all that. You might have asked for some other inspections, like a wood destroying insect inspection or a chimney inspection. Okay, so there's many different types of inspections that can happen depending on your jurisdiction. Okay, in some areas, like in Maryland, for example, when I fill out my, if I'm using not a G card document, but if I'm using Maryland Association of Realtors, I need to specify in advance which inspections I'm getting. G-Car, I don't have to do that. So pay attention to your contract that you are using and just see which inspections you're doing and whether or not you need to declare those in advance. After the inspection, no questions before I go on. Any questions? Okay.
Yeah, I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Who pays for the home
Oh,
inspection?
good question. Yeah, good question. The buyer.
Okay, so they're paying for this like
Mhm.
as it's happening. It's not like part of the contract.
So, most of the time, my buyer will pay before the inspection happens. Some inspection companies allow you to have that be on the settlement statement and get paid at settlement, but not everyone will. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, sure. That's a good question. Okay, so then typically after the inspection, I usually call the listing agent. I'm not giving them all the details, but I kind of give them a general sense of how things went. And I'm doing this because I think it helps my negotiation. Okay, for example, if I found some big items, let's say the roof is bad and the HVAC's really old, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. I might call the listing agent afterward and just say, hey, some major issues came up, the HVAC, the roof. We don't have the report yet. Just wanted to give you a heads up that we had a couple major issues. And the reason I'm saying that is that they're kind of aware, okay, we're going to have we might have some repair requests here, or things might be in trouble here because of this. Or on the other hand, if things were pretty smooth, I might say that kind of the same thing. It went pretty well. We don't have the report yet. I don't know what my client wants to do yet, but there didn't seem to be any major issues. I just kind of give them a heads up of how things are going to be to help my negotiation. And I'm also going to talk to the lender because quite often I ask the lender to wait to order the appraisal until after we have the inspection. Anybody know why I don't want the lender to immediately order the appraisal?
Because they might need to do it again if some things are not working. That would affect the price of the house.
The appraisal isn't going to do, no, close. The appraiser is not going to test things. It's not going to inspect things on the appraisal.
So Kirsten, so what the buyer might want to back out based on the inspection report. So it's no need to have an appraisal done if I'm not going to buy it.
Exactly. That's right. So here's the thing. Imagine that the appraisal, imagine the inspection happens and there's some big issues and my buyer wants to get out. Okay. I don't want them to have spent a whole bunch of money doing this appraisal, right? If then we're just going to drop the contract anyway. Buyer is also paying for the appraisal. And so it's just a lot of money to spend if we might get out of the contract. Now, sometimes if the house is in pretty good condition and we're really in a hurry, we're going to go ahead and order the appraisal at the beginning. Okay, so it's not like it happens like this every time. This will be something you and your lender will talk about. But if I'm delaying to order the appraisal to after the inspection, when I get to my car after the inspection, I'm calling my lender and saying, the inspection went pretty fine, go ahead and order the appraisal. Or, the roof is falling in, don't order the appraisal. I think they're gonna get out of this one and give them an update. And then this is something that all of the transaction coordinators do, so I can point this one out. We have to do the property inspection notice, it's called in some places. Some jurisdictions call it something else, but it's the form where you ask the seller to make repairs. Okay, this is just one little line on this very long checklist, but this is an item that I see agents do incorrectly all the time. And this is one of the reasons why I really like you to use a transaction coordinator, because they know how to do it properly. So when you're requesting a repair, the error that I see made most often is not being very specific about what you want done. Okay, so what it'll be something like this. Let's say that an outlet wasn't working in the living room. Okay, there's an outlet under the picture window and that outlet isn't working. My property inspection notice should say something like licensed electrician to repair or replace outlet below the picture window in the living room. It should say something like that. I'm specifying who is doing it, a licensed contractor, and exactly what I want them to do. And what happens when I'm on the listing side, agents from other brokerages, not Keller Williams, because they haven't gotten trained, they send me notices that are just too vague. Like one time I had one where they wrote down treat mold. Okay, well, what does that mean? So if I just spray some bleach on it, I'm treating mold, right? I think they probably wanted something more thorough than that, but if they didn't say it, then we don't have to do it. So it's very, very important how you write these things. So you don't need to know how to do it right away. You're going to use a transaction coordinator. Your transaction coordinator is going to do it properly. You're going to see what they do so that you sort of start to learn how to write them. Okay. But this inspection, this document is where we ask for whatever repairs my client wants, and then we negotiate, because sometimes the seller won't agree to do all of those repairs. You might have 10 things the buyer wants fixed. Maybe they're going to agree to do 5 of them. We don't know. Okay, so they're going to agree to some amount of these repairs. Or maybe none of them. Or maybe they're going to offer a seller credit instead of them fixing them. Okay, so that might be, maybe there were 10 things you wanted fixed. They were all minor things. Maybe the sellers would say, instead of doing those repairs, would your buyer accept $2,000? And if that's okay with your buyer, that's actually a much easier way to handle things because then the buyer's in control of the repairs. They can use any contractor they want. They'll just take care of it after settlement. But again, I mentioned before how we can only have we have a maximum amount of seller concession we're allowed to take. We have to discuss this with the lender and make sure it's not under that maximum.
I just had a buyer that had that happen. We had 3% seller credit already. We had some major structural issues with the house that they wanted the seller to fix. And the seller didn't really want to deal with it. So the seller reduced the price.
Okay.
And my clients accepted it.
Good. There you go. Awesome. And now sometimes, if possible, a seller credit is often better than a reduction in price because they get all that money right now instead of spaced out over 30 years. But if you have a maximum concession, you can't do that, you know? Yeah, that's great. Sometimes we just have to negotiate it. And as long as everybody's happy in the end, that's all we care about, right? All right. So after the inspection, now things are going to slow down. So up to this point in my list, you've been very busy. You showed a house, you wrote an offer, like it has been nonstop since you showed that house. You've gotten so much done. Now that once we're past the inspection, things slow down. So all that stuff may have happened in like a week. Okay. Now it's going to slow down. So I'm going to upload anything I have to Command into the opportunity. The inspection reports, my property inspection notice, any documents I have. I'm not going to submit yet. I'm just going to put them in Command just so I don't forget later. I'm going to talk to my buyer about a home warranty again. I may have talked to them about that in the beginning, but I'm going to mention it here because sometimes after the inspection, the buyer decides maybe I should get a home warranty. You know, the heat is working right now, you know, but I have noticing that it's kind of an older house. Maybe I'd be more comfortable with that, whatever. So talk to them about that, see if they want that. Verify that the lender has ordered the appraisal, which they probably have. You might need some homeowners association or condo documents. If you don't have those yet, bug the listing agent to get them. You're going to coordinate with the lender to remind the buyers to purchase homeowners insurance. In my Friday partner spotlight that I do every week, I had a home insurance, I had an insurance person just a couple of weeks ago. Watch that video. She was really helpful. But they're going to need to take care of their homeowners insurance before they buy the house. Okay. And then we're waiting for the appraisal to come in. Okay. So
isn't there a timeline on that? Like the insurance has to be within a certain number of days or something because they might not be insurable or something like that? There's an out on the contract because of that?
It depends on your jurisdiction, whether there is that or not. I kind of like to do it sooner rather than later anyway, just to get it done, right? So I'm like, once the inspection's done, I'm just on this, like get the buyer to do it. Like, I'm kind of in hurry up mode, I guess. When the appraisal comes in, okay, if the appraisal comes in, what do you guys think we do? Let's say the contract is for 400,000 and the appraisal comes in at 425. So it comes in higher than we paid. What do you think we do?
You said the appraisal comes in higher or the...
Yeah, go ahead, Stephanie. Appraisal comes in higher.
Your buyer does instant equity.
Your buyer
just let the listing agent know that it came in at value.
Correct. Exactly. We do not tell the listing agent the amount. Okay, we do not. So the appraisal comes in high. You reach out to the listing agent and say, hey, the appraisal came in at value. Good news. That's all you say. You don't tell them it was higher. If it was exactly the same, then you tell them, same thing. It came at value. What if it comes in lower? One person.
Renegotiate?
Negotiate. Yeah, what were you going to say, Michelle?
I'm gonna say we let them know we have to show them what it came in at, because that's a must. Because you can't make stuff up and pop it in your head.
Correct.
And then we would negotiate who's gonna be responsible for the difference.
Right. So if it comes in lower, okay, we're going to send the appraisal to the listing agent. And then there's a form, we have to, I mean, we just are going to have to go back and forth a little bit. So either the seller can drop their price to the appraised value, or the buyer can bring extra cash. Now, if they're already putting down more than the minimum amount, they might not, they might already be bringing enough cash. Okay, so we'll have to talk to the lender about that. But that's got to be resolved. They cannot get the loan on a house that if the appraisal doesn't come in unless they're bringing in that extra cash. So we have to resolve that. So we're going to negotiate and resolve that. We also have to resolve what are called lender required repairs. Okay, lender required repairs are not the same thing as an inspection. Okay, here's what happens. We've already had an inspection. We already resolved that. The appraiser comes through and they may notice some things that have to be resolved before your buyer buys the house. You cannot get a credit for these. The seller has to fix these before purchasing the house. If the loan is an FHA loan or a VA loan, you're more likely to have lender required repairs. Conventional loan, you're likely not to have lender required repairs. And here are some examples of some common ones. I see a lot for chipping paint. Okay, if there's any chipping paint in the house, even if it's outside, an FHA loan or a VA loan is going to flag that and it's going to need to be repaired before your seller buys the house. One time I was on the listing side and there was chipping paint like about this big on a step outside. And before settlement, the seller had to scrape the chipping paint off and repaint it, and the appraiser had to come back out and see that it was done. Okay, so chipping paint, missing handrails, I see a lot. If you've got a few steps, 3 steps, you need a handrail. I see that a lot. Smoke alarms. If you have, I had one time had one where the stove, had 4 burners on it and 3 of them worked and 1 didn't. That was a lender required repair. They had to replace or repair the stove. So if there are any lender required repairs, the seller has to take care of those. They cannot be something with a credit. They've got to be fixed. I'm going to upload the appraisal, and if we had any more addenda, up to my opportunity. I'm not submitting yet. I'm just in the habit of putting all of my documents into command as I get them. And then I'm going to complete my commissions tab. So here's why I'm saying to do this now. Your commissions tab is where you type things in like, I had a referral fee to this person. I had to pay a transaction coordinator. Your transaction coordinator may do this job for you, okay, depending on your transaction coordinator. We're not going to submit it, but it's just a good habit to do this early while you're kind of thinking about it. Yeah, Fatima, did you have a question?
Yes, please. In a case whereby you ordered the inspection and the seller said subsequently that she fixed the property, but she didn't fix it or didn't fix it properly, then you ordered a re-inspection, like a second inspection, and you found that out.
Yeah.
So whether she eventually does it or not, if you choose to order a third inspection after she says she has done it again, can you, is there a way the buyer can make the seller be the one to pay for the third inspection since the seller has been the one lying?
Yeah, you would have to negotiate that with the listing agent. But that seems fair, right? If they didn't do the repairs, but that would be a negotiation between you and the listing agent. Good question. All right. I'm going to submit the home warranty to the title company if there is one, so that can get paid at settlement. And I'm going to obtain any receipts for any repairs. Okay, so here's what this is about. So if I'm on the listing side, I always tell the seller to have the repairs done 10 days before settlement. And I'm saying 10 days before settlement because I want them done a week before settlement. So I'm giving them a little bit of a quicker deadline than I really want. But the repairs ought to be done by a week before settlement. Does that happen all the time? No. But we want to be able to check on them, right? So let's say that the seller agreed from the inspection, they were going to replace an outlet and, blah, blah, blah. They had like 5 things they were going to do. And maybe there was also a lender required repair. you want receipts from all of those repairs. And they probably specified that a licensed contractor needed to do those repairs. So your receipt should have that contractor's information on it. We want their their phone number, the company name, and also their home like MHIC number. Well, that's the Maryland one, but their license number as a contractor. You want all that information on the receipt because if a contractor repaired something and there's a problem with it, your client then can go back to that contractor if something needs to be done. You can also go and inspect the repair. If it's just an outlet getting fixed, I probably not going to go inspect it because I can't see anything different. I'll probably just take the receipt, right? But if there was something that I could see, maybe we'd want to go back to the house and look at the repair and see that it's been done. That's totally fine to do. Again, I'm going to upload this to my Opportunity just as a place to keep them so they're safe. So I always have them. And now I'm ready to schedule settlement. So I'm going to call the title company and schedule when we're going to settle. Okay. This could be at your office. This could be at the title company office. It could be at another location. Some title companies charge more for doing it at other locations. Some don't. So you'll have to talk to your title company. I've done settlements in the house we were buying. I've done settlements at an assisted living facility. Like they could be anywhere. Buyers usually need to sign with a pen. In Maryland, they need to sign with a pen. Sellers will often settle in advance. Sometimes they go to the title company and sign. Sometimes there are ways to do it remotely over Zoom. But just expect that the buyer and seller probably aren't going to be there at settlement together. Probably it's just going to be you and your buyer, and your seller will have already signed. Used to be that everybody signed together, but not anymore. It's not typically like that. So you get that settlement scheduled. Questions before I move on to the next section? Yeah, Jeanette.
When you have your contract, don't you have a tentative settlement date? What happens if it's going to be like beyond the date on the contract?
If it's going to be later, then you would need an extension.
Okay.
Yep. But even if it's happening on the same day, I still need to schedule it. Do you know what I mean? So if my contract says March 3rd, I still need to schedule that it's happening at 11 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah. So you need an exact time scheduled with the title company when everybody's going to come in. So that's more what I meant, is just like what time. Yeah. Thank you though. But yes, that's a really good point. If it's for whatever reason, if any deadline is not going to be met, any one of them, you need an extension before it happens. You can also schedule early if everybody's okay with it. Like maybe you set, it's going to be March 6th, but everybody's ready already, so you might settle early. If everybody wants to, it's totally fine. If everybody wants to. All right, so a few days before settlement, you're going to hear clear to close from your lender. Okay, that's a milestone. That's exciting. That means the loan is completely finally done, right? They've gotten all their documents ready. We want to hear that. We're going to confirm settlement. Okay, when that is, just as it's coming up. Congratulate your buyer. And if you don't have a review yet, ask for one. Okay, we want to get a review. You're going to review the Alta settlement statement with your buyer. If you have not received one, you would ask the title company for one. It's important for you to understand this Alta settlement statement. We had a class on it maybe last month, something like that. You can watch the recording. I really want you to understand it because your buyer is going to want to talk to you about it. So they're going through this with the title company, but it's still important for you to ask them if they have any questions and for you to completely understand it. Okay, answer any questions they have, make sure they're comfortable prior to going to settlement. And then I'm going to schedule the final walkthrough. Now, my preference, I personally like to do my final walkthrough the morning of settlement. Like ideally, I'm doing my walkthrough at 10 and settlements at 11. That's what I want. Okay. My reasoning for that is something can happen to the house. I one time had a situation where I was on the listing side. This house was a vacant house that was being sold. And the sellers did not live there. I think it was an estate. They had inherited it. Well, it turns out on the day of settlement, the buyers show up at settlement and they had gone to the house that morning. And no kidding, during the night, there was a storm and a tree fell and it fell on top of the fence. Right? Had the sellers not done a walkthrough that morning, they would have bought a house with a tree on the fence, because they didn't do the walkthrough that last minute. So it was so good. Even though I was on the seller side, I was glad that didn't happen to them. They realized it that morning. Because this was a cash deal, we were able to work things out. I think the seller ended up giving the buyers money and, problem solved, and we moved on and everything went fine. So when you do your final walkthrough, this is a really quick. You're barely in the house. You're just zipping through, making sure everything is still in the same condition. If the sellers were moving out, did they accidentally break a window as they were moving out? That you would want to know that, right? Did they remove the washer and dryer even though those were supposed to come with the house, right? No, I don't. I want to make sure that didn't happen. So we have a walkthrough, morning of settlement, preferably. You could do it the day before, to make sure all those things are on there. And then I'm just gonna, so I do get that scheduled. I haven't done it yet. I'm gonna remind the buyer of when I'm going to settlement, and I'm going to remind the buyer to turn on all utilities. Different jurisdictions have different utilities that have to be turned on. In the area where I am in Maryland, usually the title company handles water, but the electric and gas are handled by the buyer. So just make sure they turn those on. And then we need to coordinate the keys with the listing agent. All right, so I had mentioned before that usually the seller doesn't attend settlement. Usually they sign in advance. Not always, but typically I'm seeing them signing in advance. So think about it this way. You're not going to see the seller that day, and you need to have a key in the lockbox that morning to do your walkthrough. So typically the way I do it is I go to my walkthrough in the morning, and I have already coordinated with the listing agent that I'm going to take the key out of the lockbox. So we agree up in advance that on the final walkthrough, I'm taking the key with me. Usually the seller will leave all of the other keys, like on the kitchen counter or something like that, kitchen drawer, somewhere like that. Just one key is in the lockbox, and I take that with me when I go to settlement. And then at settlement, I hand that key to the seller. And then the listing agent will later come by and take the lockbox off of the door. So that's commonly how it works. It could be in different ways though. So the big thing is to coordinate with the listing agent and figure out what makes sense for everybody for making sure that the buyer gets the keys from the seller. You might be giving your buyer a gift, so take care of that. And then make sure that the buyer has sent whatever funds they need to send in advance of closing. We don't want them doing that on the same day. Okay, I'm putting myself a note here. Beware of wire fraud. You may have heard about this. There's a lot of fraud going on. I actually had it attempted on one of my transactions one time. All right, so here's what happens. Okay, here's the scam that actually somebody tried to do in one of my transactions. I'll tell you how it happened with me. I was on the listing side. This was back when I did auctions, so it had been a former auction. Anyway, I had a listing. The buyers had contacted me directly, and because I was representing the seller, I referred the buyers out to another agent who I was friends with. Okay, so here I'm on the listing side. Buyer's agent is my friend. Okay, and I referred the buyers to her. The day before settlement, her buyers call her and say, "Hey, I just got your email with the new wiring instructions, but we already sent the wire." And she said, "What email?" Right? So the scam, they tried to do the scam on us, and luckily the buyer had already wired the funds. Here's the scam. Somebody hacks into somebody's email and sends wiring instructions that look exactly like the instructions that you were already sent, but they change the numbers to an account, like an offshore bank account. Buyer wires the money and it's gone. It's gone forever. Okay, somebody has stolen it. So to avoid wire fraud, when your buyer is wiring money, they should call a human being on the phone at the title company and confirm the wiring instructions. So they get on the phone, they don't click a link that's in any email, they go to Universal Title's phone number that they've been calling all this time, call them up and say, "Can I confirm the wiring instructions with you?" And they recite the numbers that they are seeing. Really important to do that because there is wire fraud. It happens all the time, and I've seen it attempted in my transaction. We want the buyer to send that money in advance. Don't wait till the day of settlement. Wiring is not immediate. Sometimes it can take a couple hours to do it the day before. All right, settlement day. We're almost at the end. Final walkthrough with the buyer. Take a photo in front of the house. You're going to want that later, right? There is a final walkthrough form in some jurisdictions that you can use if you want. You're going to attend settlement with your buyer, give them a gift if you are doing that, take a photo, give them their keys. If you don't have a review yet, ask again. Typically, you're not going to be handed a paper check. Usually those things are either mailed to the office or wired to the office. But should someone ever hand you a paper check, you can't deposit that in your own account if it doesn't have your name on it. If a check is written to Keller Williams, you need to bring that to the office. You're going to scan in the settlement statement and upload it to the opportunity. Now that's the last document you were waiting for. Once you've uploaded that document, you could submit it for compliance. And because you've been doing it all along, you're able to just do this last little step and submit it, and that gets you paid as quickly as possible. Verify the commissions tab and submit. Okay, and now your client is they're no longer a buyer, right? They've already bought a house, so I'm going to update command, right? So I'll put their new address in, maybe I have different tags, maybe monthly neighborhood nurture smart plan, home anniversary smart plan, quarterly phone call, whatever you're going to use, their contact should be updated as now they're just a past client. There may be a future seller. Now you do your social media post, thank you card to the listing agent or a text, whatever you're going to do. And you might want to give the listing agent a review and ask for one too. Phew! That was a long list. Okay, let's open it up for some final questions.
We really need the video session video link of this session actually, because there are a lot of good discussion points.
Yeah. So for anybody in coaching, it will be in the coaching platform. Yeah, I agree. It's a lot.
Thank you. So it will be on the Go Collab.
It'll be on the on Go Collab. Yep, it'll be there in a couple days.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And my handout from today is already there. It's in the Working with Buyers tab channel on the left. All right, more questions. All right. I have a class very similar to this that seller transactions start to finish. We'll have that one in, I don't remember when that's scheduled, probably April or something like that. All right, it's a lot, but you've got the checklist, right? And just one thing at a time, but what I'm hoping is that now that you have this sort of overview of how things go, that it's going to help when you have your first client, right? And you know kind of what's coming up. You don't have to remember the whole thing. You're going to use your checklist. And most of you are in coaching. So your coach is going to work through this with you and just help you keep on track of everything. All right, final questions before we hang it up? All right, well, thank you everybody for attending. I know this went way over as I expected it probably would because that's the way this class is. Every other class I can end on time. This one, no way.
Much needed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.
A lot of very good information that I did.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. We just want to make your transactions go through, right?
Yep.
All right. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.